So I think we'll start off class today by just doing a review on the steps to calculating gross wages, because that's pretty much where we left off last time. And if I could put on my glasses here, I probably can see a little better. We had 5 steps, so let's just see if we can remember what those are. So when I ask you, first off, what am I talking about when I say we're trying to figure out wages for non-exempt employees? What am I referring to? Non-exempt.
They are required to still get overtime pay and blue collar.
They are, it's generally blue collar folks. They're required to get overtime. So fill in the blank. They're not exempt from the overtime provisions of the they're not exempt from overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So if I put somebody on salary, does that automatically make them exempt? No. What kinds of people are exempt? White collar people. Like, what are some of the categories? Now you're on.
Yeah, the administration.
Administrators, executives, professionals. There was like a caveat for, I think, creative professionals, computer, some or others, the techies, I guess, is the overall branding, and outside salespeople. I think those are the 6 categories. And they have to make at least how much a week? That's minimum wage. Good remembrance, though. Wrong concept, but good number. They have to make at least $455 a week and fit one of those 6 categories. So what if I hire you to be my chief office administrator, and I put you on salary, I pay you $1,900 a month, and basically your job description is to be my gopher, to do all my scheduling, to take care of the phones, to make the daily deposits, and I work you 60 hours a week. But you're an administrator, right? It's right in your title.
You have to like hire and fire.
That's the key. What's that called, that whole big package of stuff you have to be responsible for? If you have what? Discretionary power. That means I figure out how to do my job. I use the most efficient tactics. If you give me a business problem, you don't say, set up a spreadsheet in Excel and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I need to figure out how to do it myself. How do I solve the problem? How do I present it to the board? How do I get other people, personnel in here to help me accomplish my tasks? That's discretionary power. Lots and lots of routine jobs. I mean, you don't have any discretionary power if you're working the window at Taco Bell. Like, here's your mic, here's your script, here's your cash register, and get her done, right? So that's really the caveat. So I'm doing all that back up to lead into this screen as a review. This is what we're practicing here is calculating pay for people that are on salary but non-exempt. In other words, they do have to be paid overtime. Okay, step 1, annualized salary. What's the key that you've got to remember here? If I tell you that I quoted you a salary of $826 a week, how are you going to annualize it? Multiply it by 52. How about if I quoted you $1,856 a month? Multiply by 12. What if I told you I quoted you that every other week? Multiply by 26. What if I quoted you that twice a month? Multiply by 24. Okay, good. So you've got those 4 down. Excellent. Okay, Then on the slide, it says calculate regular weekly gross, but basically what was I coaching you to do instead? Calculate the regular what? Is it necessarily weekly? Or just calculate the regular gross paycheck. So once you get to the annual salary, then what's your next question? To get to number 2, though, so now I've got my annual salary. I make $30,693 a year. How do you get to my regular gross paycheck? What do you have to ask me? How often do you get paid? Exactly. And then you're going to divide by 52 or 26 or 24 or 12. Okay, great. Number 3, calculate hourly pay. I told you to always go back to what? Annual salary, very good, and do what? Right, so let's kind of rephrase that a little bit, Olivia. I asked you to go up and take the annual salary and divide by the number of hours in the work year. And if you work a typical 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, that number is going to be what? 2,080 hours. But you can't just plug that number in, because we're going to see here in a couple examples. What if I've got a 35-hour work week? You know, professors on contract for 8.5 months. So you can't always just plug in 2,080, can you? Okay, then you get the hourly pay. Overtime, pretty self-explanatory, times 1.5. And then how do you recap number 5 to get the final check? You have to add what plus what? That's it. Regular gross pay plus, open up your parentheses, overtime rate times number of overtime hours. Okay? Awesome. Let's try a refresher. Okay. This isn't a refresher. This is a new one. Okay. Let's try this. Let's say that I work in a company where I'm quoted $2,000 a month. I'm paid semi-monthly. My full-time work week hours. Now, stick with me here. So I've hired you to be my technician in my veterinarian clinic. And I quote you $2,000 a month in salary. I run payroll twice a month. And in my company, everybody's off at 3 o'clock on Friday. So it's a 38-hour work week. In other words, I'm quoting you this salary for this many hours in a week, right? So right away, what goes off in your head, what calculation are you going to have to modify? Yeah, you're going to have to figure out the new number of hours in a full-time work year. But there's also something interesting. When I tell you this, what does that actually mean in my company? When do you hit overtime? When you get to 38 hours. Between 38 and 40 hours a week, I'm going to give you your regular hourly wage as overtime. But by law, once this happens, I have to give you 1.5 times. So if I pay roughly every other week or about every 15 days, if there's 16 hours of overtime in my company, how many of those were between 38 and 40 hours? 4. 2 in 2 weeks, right? So So my overtime's not as easy, is it? Go ahead.
Can we just do a regular 40-hour work week and then factor in 14 hours of overtime then? Or I mean,
No. Because really, okay, let me just finish this and then I'll answer your question. So really what we've got going on here when we say overtime in my company is 4 extra hours at what? At what rate? The regular rate, right? And what? How many hours? 12 hours at the what rate? At the 1.5, right? Or the OT. So to answer your question, Hannah, on your last calculation, you have 3 pieces to the algebraic equation. It's regular gross plus 4 hours at regular rate plus 12 hours at overtime rate. Okay, go ahead, and I want you to, if I come around and look at your notebooks, I want to see every one of those equations labeled like we were practicing. So number 1, annualize the salary. And so for those of you that are listening online, I would expect you to take out your notebook, your calculator, and go ahead. I'm going to give some quiet time once I shut up, and you should be working it at home as well. did we come to as far as their hourly rate? I think that's correct. How many hours were in the work year then? 1976. So the third bullet. Anybody not get to that? 2,000 times 12 is 24 grand. 24 grand divided by 24 paychecks is 1,000. Back up to the 24 grand divided by 1,976 hours equals this. What's my overtime rate? And then my last algebraic phrase, I've got to close up two sets of parentheses, don't I? I've got the $1,000 regular pay plus how many extra hours at 12:15? Right? 4 hours, good. And then 12 hours. Because I've really got two levels of overtime. So what's my finishing gross? Do I have a second on that number? Excellent. Want to try one more of those and then we'll move on? Okay, next scenario. I work in San Francisco, and honestly, I don't know if any of you have ever been in San Francisco traffic. It's a nightmare. So what I do is my work day is from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I give you a salary for a 35-hour work week. And actually, that's happening more and more in big cities where people aren't asking for more money because of taxes and commutes and everything. They'd rather have more time, right? That gives me the whole afternoon with my kids. So, okay, in my company, I'm going to be very hungry in San Francisco on this, so forget that example. But let's say, okay, those numbers aren't even feasible. I'm going to give you another one. I'm quoted, let's just work this one. I'm quoted, I mean, I'm practically going to be hungry on this. And they're paid bi-weekly. So you don't have to deal with traffic at all. And in one pay period, you have to figure out how to split up that 15 hours. So let me give you a chance to write it down and then have a little bit of a think about it. It's no point in doing all the numbers if you don't have this first piece right. What do you think about that 15 hours of overtime? One more time, Amber.
10 of it's going to be overtime?
10 of it's going to be paid out at the what? At the regular rate, right? Because between 35 and 40 hours for 2 weeks, you with me? So 1 week, 35 to 40 hours, second week 35 to 40 hours, so 10 of those 15 hours are still under 40 a week, right?
What's your regular?
That's my overtime rate for those hours is my regular rate. And then the last 5 I get paid out at what? Overtime. Do you need help figuring out how I got to that?
Why is, okay, if it's a 35 hours, right, then why isn't it 5 hours regular?
Because it's 2 weeks of my pay period, I paid by the week.
Oh.
And that's the question. Did everybody hear what Hannah asked? And that's a really common error. She goes, how come it's not only 5 hours between 35 and 40? Because of this, because of the bi-weekly. Everybody come this far? You have a question, Josh? Okay. y'all get $2,076.99, roughly. You've got furrowed eyebrows in the back there. Did you miss a number somewhere? Okay, tell me if you can identify where you went askew, then I can help. Okay. Okay, how many times a year am I paid? Common error, 26. If I said semi-monthly, my guess is your numbers would be on. Anybody else fall for that 24 versus 26 problem? If you hear biweekly or semi-monthly, stop yourself and make sure that you do a check-in, because that is, I mean, it's a super easy place, and obviously nothing's going to turn out if you're giving them 2 extra checks a year and taking away 2 checks a year. Okay? All right, let's, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What do you call that fund at 2374? Do you care to label that, or?
It's like overtime rate 1 and overtime rate 2.
Okay.
And, you know, and in companies, I mean, like, say, you know, years ago when I worked at a CPA firm, one of the guys, young guy or young family, he's like, he'd do anything to make money, so he also did, like, the gardening and the snow shoveling and stuff. So he got a different rate for that than being a CPA, obviously. And then, so when he goes into overtime, what happens? You're getting some overtime, weighted average on your gardening wages of $10 an hour, and some on your CPA wages of $23 an hour. So, you know, you get lots of times you'll have like a couple different overtime rates. So the question was, how do I label this? I would call this OT rate 1, OT rate 2. Kelly? Okay. How did we come to this? Can somebody help him out? What did you do divided by what did you do?
Well, I know you take, I know.
Go ahead.
Right?
Okay, go ahead.
For some reason.
Well, what did
I
you do?
took the total, the annual.
Okay.
Divided the hours.
Okay, and what did you get for the hours?
Or no, I divided it by the wage. 1660. That's what I did, so I did that wrong. Right?
Yes, right, wrong.
Right.
Right, it's wrong.
Yeah.
So, and that's the whole thing. There's a couple more problems. Just keep working on them. I mean, it's just like anything. Not to compare you to my puppy, but I take my puppy out every morning and we do loose leash walking, and every day it's like a brand new day. Do we remember what we did yesterday? You know, don't pull on the leash. So it's like the more we do things, the more it becomes muscle memory, and then you don't have to think about it. Okay, so the number of hours, what were they again?
18.
Yeah. Okay. And so Kelly, how did they get that? What times what?
Oh, they took the 35 hours times the 15.
Yep, they sure did.
Yeah, I just got it.
All right, good. So go practice the other couple ones that are in the PowerPoint. So you can try number 3, number 4, and number 5. If we have time, we'll go back and work those together. Okay, so we are essentially then here. I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time on this because it's not super common. But basically, it's if you have a fluctuating schedule when you're on salary, how you go about calculating overtime. So let's say I run a magazine, you know, and obviously the week before we publish, it's probably going to be a much longer week than the week after distribution, right? I'm going to expect more out of my workers. So this is just kind of walking you through how you do overtime in that situation. And again, I'm not going to go through a ton of numbers here other than for you to realize right away what what do you want me to be aware of? If you're non-exempt and I work you 50 hours in 1 week and 30 the next, what's the issue? One more time. Well, 50 in week 1 and 30 in week 2. Yeah, the issue is you can't just go, oh, that's 80 hours at regular wage, okay? Because you worked more than 40 hours in 1 week and you're non-exempt. So we can't do that comp timey thing, can we? Okay, that's just a fluctuating work week, and you still got to be paid overtime. The only thing that I really want to pull your attention to here is the difference, or the introduction, I guess, of this term overtime premium. Overtime premium is the 0.5 you tack on the regular hourly wage. What's the difference then between an overtime premium and an overtime rate?
Premium is the addition.
The premium's the add-on, exactly. The premium's the tack-on. Everyone, so if I pay you guys all $10 an hour, what's your overtime premium? 5. What's your overtime rate? 15. Your overtime rate is $15 an hour. Your overtime premium or your tack-on is $5. Okay, so put that in kind of the back of your mind because we're going to be working with that with some numbers here in a second. Okay, so the reason I'm skipping through some slides is, honestly, I could lose you all in the first week if I wanted to completely over-inundate you with a bazillion calculations. What I choose to do is to keep you in the class and teach you the things that you're going to see a lot, right? Like that fluctuating work week and the BLO plan. I mean, I've been, in and out of accounting since I was 20-odd years old, and I mean, I've seen it a handful of times. So is that important to me that you know that? Not really. This is pretty important. Anybody have a feel for what this is? Go ahead.
I just started getting paid piece rate.
Oh, you did?
Like
Okay.
looking into it.
Where do you work?
Or my guy did.
Okay.
He sent me Sunny Details cars.
Oh,
So
right.
it's hourly, and then gets a certain amount of hours per car, and he completes it.
Yep.
And a certain amount of time he gets.
Absolutely. That's totally what piece rate is. It can be standalone. Like I do quality control, on tea bags, boxes of tea bags. And for every box of tea bags that comes through, I get paid 8 cents to do quality assurance on it. Or I can be paid by the hour, plus a percentage of completion of each vehicle that I detail or paint or powder coat or whatever, right? So you can craft your commission and your piece rate and your compensation plan any way you want, right? There's nothing the Fair Labor Standards Act says you've got to do it this way, as long as you're complying with minimum wage and overtime, right? And the market will bear it. If he says, okay, that sounds like a fair deal to me, and you can get workers at that rate, good on you. Okay, so piece rate, the piece rate we're going to look at is the examples are just purely piece rate. In other words, it's not in addition to something else, but it surely could be. Okay? So there's two really ways to calculate piece rate. Oh, I'm sorry, first let me do a little bit more of an introduction. So Fair Labor Standards Act says that even if I'm piece rate or piecework, like I do quality control for Celestial Seasonings in Boulder, Colorado, and I do QA on their teas. I have to be paid for non-productive time, like getting my workstation ready and shutting down at night and cleaning up my workstation. I mean, that's non-productive time. In other words, I'm not doing QC, passing things down the line, but I still got to be paid for it. Obviously, one of the main things that my employer's got to make sure of, and again in Boulder, if anyone's ever been there, you need to make a whole bunch more than $8 an hour to feed yourself in Boulder, Colorado. But if I worked in a little town where I could actually get people for minimum wage, I would still have to make sure that I was getting the minimum wage regardless. And there's two ways of doing it. And what I really find, I'll just kind of introduce these, but what I find is students do a lot better seeing actual numbers than a whole bunch of words. So there's really two methods, method A and method B. Method A, you can see in the third bullet, picks up this term overtime premium. So basically what we're going to do in method A is figure out how many units they did quality control on times the amount I give them per unit and divide by their total number of hours to get their hourly rate. Then I'm going to figure out that 0.5, that tack-on amount, and give them that for all of their overtime hours. So that's method A. Method B, and please note, is going to give you a different number than method A, so don't think I'm going to work it both ways and come up to the same number. You're not. This one gives you one rate for everything you did quality control on in 40 hours, and whatever your rate was times 1.5 for all the units that you did over 40 hours. So they're different emphasis. Note, two methods don't give same results. Okay, let's try one. And we're going to calculate it both ways. So I'm an inspector. Let's say that I inspect crates of mussels. I work at a mussel and oyster farm in Maryland, and in 1 week I inspected 4,812 crates of mussels, and I worked 47.25 hours. Of the 4,812 crates of mussels and oysters, 600 of those were inspected after 40 hours. So how many crates did I inspect in my first 40 hours? 4,212, right? 4812 minus 600. And I get 12 cents for every crate. Calculate gross pay using both methods. Okay, so please write method A. And your first algebraic equation is going to be to figure out what you think they earned in total for inspecting all 4,812 crates at 12 cents a unit. What do you think their total gross before overtime is? And in your labeling, now that we're using units in addition to dollars, make sure to do that, because when you see a whole ton of numbers in front of you, it's very easy to get confused. What is the last part of this? 44. Okay, so does everybody agree that baseline, she gets 577.44? The next question is, how much do you think she makes an hour? You're going to take that number and divide it by what? Total hours. 47.25. Again, please label, what am I calling this 47.25? Hours. How much am I making an hour? 12.22? Do I have a second on that? You didn't say that with much much assuredness. That's my regular rate, right? Okay, based on what I explained to you, what do you think I have to do? Can I just pay her the $577.44? How come you're shaking your head? What do I need to figure out? Okay, am I going to figure out her overtime rate or her overtime premium? And when you give me your answer, tell me why. Yeah, how come? Do I already have her regular hourly rate for all 47.25 hours? Yeah, I did that right here. Does everybody agree that I've already, in that 577, I'm already paying her a regular hourly rate for all 47.25 hours? So what do I need to do that last 7.25 hours? Tack on the 0.5. So figure out the 0.5 and then tack that on for the last hours over 40, please, and get me her total. So you're going to have two more algebraic equations. This one's going to figure out the overtime premium. This one's going to put it all together. I think I've got one too many. So my pull it together is regular rate, or regular wages, excuse me, plus what? Yeah, exactly. And how are you going to label this 7.25 hours? What'd you get, Kelly?
Let's see, 621.74.
Do I have a second? I feel like I'm in a board meeting. Do I have a second on that motion? Okay.
Where did you get the 7.25?
She worked 47.25 hours. So this is everything over 40, right? Okay. Method B doesn't care about hours. What does method B emphasize? Yeah, units. When did I make the units? So the first, what did I tell you? 4,212 units were made during my regular work week. The last 600 were made after that. So they got paid at a different rate. Take that different rate out to 3 decimal places. So the overtime piece rate goes out to 3 decimal places. So figure out what that is, clear your calculator, and make sure you only put it in at 3 places. So what did this end up being? How much does she get for her last 600 units? Point 0.180. But it could easily be a number other than 0. You always go up to 3 places. So obviously, which method is she going to prefer? Now, A. They're never going to equal, but your check, your reasonableness check, is that they're close. Okay, they're not going to be off by, $80. They're going to be, off by 1% or 2%. The employer chooses, but you come to work for me under the agreement. Which of these do you think sends the kind of message that you want to send to your employees? Huh? Well, but could B be more than A? Sure could. What's the difference in the message this sends? What are you going to do intellectually or intuitively if you're an employee of the oyster farm and you're in method B? Well, yeah, but the more that you do when? Yeah, I'm going to take her easy 40 hours and I'm going to kick on in when I'm making time and a half. Is that necessarily the kind of what you want to promote? No, you want your employees to be as efficient and productive as they can all the time, right? Because if people are working in hyper time, that's when your quality goes down, right? So that's not really desirable, is it? Right, exactly. When you're working around any sort of machinery or these big, you don't want people injuring themselves, clearly. And when you go into hyper mode, you often are more prone to injury. Good point. Okay, let's try one more of these. 8. Yep. Okay, let's say this time, okay, so I'm a powder coater. I get 8 cents a sprocket. I worked 43 and a half hours last week, and I coated 6,897 sprockets. And 423 of those were powder coated in overtime. Method A and method B. And as much as possible, try to do it without looking at your cheat sheet. If you have to, you have to, but try to do it without. much do I make an hour in method A? 11.68? 12.68. Jump in if you have a different number, please. What am I going to label that 634? Overtime premium, right? Very good. So, my check is $551.76 plus what times what? We're on 8. Good. 3.5 what? Right, but we're going to label the 3.5 hours. Okay, so method A is going to give me what in total? 517.92. Do I have a second? Okay, awesome. B. Oh, yeah, it's got to be because this is the base, sorry. Okay. So speak up always right away when I get a number up there that I don't have a second on. What did y'all get for? Did anybody else get that? I looked at you and you smiled and nodded at the 517. You were just smiling and nodding. You didn't really know what you were smiling and nodding at. Okay.
I messed up way bad on myself.
Okay.
Like, oh.
Okay. Yes, I understand all of those numbers. Okay, let's get this up there, and then just because I think it's really illustrative, it's usually helpful to see where other people messed up because that helps us all get on the same page. So what was the number again, Amanda? 575?
73.95.
Okay. So, Hannah, what happened? Where did you get mixed
I
up?
don't know why. I just didn't factor in the hourly regular. Like I just.
Did you ever get to this number?
Well, I just did the 6897.10.8, and then from there.
That is this, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I did get 551.76.
Okay.
But instead of getting the hourly regular from there, I just went ahead and did the overtime premium.
Okay, this one, I would say really, I mean, I've taught this class for like 18 years. Step number 2 is what gets people. I don't really know why, but people start dividing that by, I'm not even going to say it out loud, just by weird numbers. What's the denominator always here? Is it ever 40?
If they work for the hours.
If they worked 40 hours, there's nothing to do past this. There isn't even a problem. Right? Huh? That's okay. No. It's believe me. You can't believe how many times I've done like bad math, and then I sit and go like, is everyone on the same page? And nobody says anything, and then like a half hour later, someone will go, I don't think you multiplied right. And it's like, okay, you have to speak up right away because we're all, our calculators should all be giving the same results. This isn't a creative writing class. There's only one answer. Okay, so in this one, I have a bunch of units that I paid out at 8 cents, right? And then I have a bunch of units that I pay out at something probably 12 cents. How many units did I pay out at 8 cents? 6474. And I'm going to put a little units after here and $1 here. And the reason I want you to get in the habit of doing that is when you test for me, a lot of these you're going to have like 5 equations in one problem, and it's going to be a 10-point problem. I don't. If you write down nothing and have a wrong answer, -10. if you write down all the math and have one screw up, -1. Okay? So I really want you to get, plus it's just good work paper habits from an accountant standpoint. And we're just detail oriented, so that's how we like to roll. Okay. Huh? Well, sense is okay, but here is the really sad fact, is that most of you being raised in the calculator era, sometimes people struggle with this. Where does the decimal place go? Which, I know, you and I are probably closer in age than we are to a lot of people in here. So, true story, when I took the CPA, we did it without a calculator. It was 22 hours of testing without a calculator. I mean, we did everything manually. So that's how I was, whatever, that's how my math brain developed. It's very different when that's not your history. So forgive me if I sound patronizing. I don't mean to. It's just, I've seen it. Okay, how many hours do I get paid out at 423? Yep, so that's really the math on that. Okay. I'm going to give you a redemptive chance here. What'd you get on this one?
So for the first one, that one is where I got the number.
Oh, okay.
15.
Okay.
They were next to each other.
Yeah, okay.
And so the total is 568.68.
Do I have a second? Okay. And my reasonableness check on this is that 568.68 is really close to 573.95. I feel pretty good about that. This is one of the hardest things to teach, is reasonableness. I'll give you an example. How much? Does anybody remember what the rate is for FICA for your taxes? It's 2 taxes. What are they? HI and what do we call Social Security? OASDI, right? And OASDI is 6.2 and HI is 1.45, so together they equal, mental math here. You guys are like, that's not going to happen. 7.65%. Here's an example of lack of reasonableness. On a test, how much was Sam's FICA if Sam makes $80,000 a year and the answer is $1.8 million? Wild. How can 7.65% of a number be like 30 times that number? Like, the gal that turned in that test wasn't checking for reasonableness. I can't really teach you it because it's not like one of these things where you go step by step, but it's before you turn something in, reread the question. Am I asking for the rate, the tax, the cap, the total for one paycheck for the whole year? And then look at your answer and be like, could somebody work 1,000 hours in a week? Well, it's not even 1,000 hours in a week. Okay, so that's like the reasonableness check, and that's the check here, are these numbers close? Okay. So I think Amber was also just talking about her partner. Part of his compensation plan is that he gets an incentive, right? If you do this and you do this in X amount of time, then you get this, additional compensation. I can set up a special incentive plan any way that I want. If you produce up to 2,000 a week, you get a dime a unit. If you go between 2,000 and 3,000, you get 12 cents a unit. That's fine, and you can do that, and that's totally legal. But I would always encourage anybody that's managing a business and doing that they couple it with what? If you're going to incent people to hurry up and work faster, you better have a really strong QA/QC department, because people are going to throw shit out there, and then your product's going to come back, and you've really shot your own self in the foot. So always make sure that if you pay differing rates for differing quantities, this is just an example, that's married with a really strong QC. Okay, commissions. Commission, we all know what that is. You can either get straight commission. You get 12% of everything you sell. Or you get a base rate plus a percentage. Or what a lot of companies will do, like if you're going to work for Merrill Lynch and financial products, or you're going to work for Carl Tyler selling vehicles, they give you a year of salary so you can kind of get your card out there and your name around it, and then you go straight commission. Or I can say, I'm going to pay you 50 grand a year, and your quota is 2,000 units, and once you sell more than those, then I'll start paying you a commission. So again, I can set it up any way that I want. So what you're not going to love about this is there's not just one way to do it. When you get something like this in an exam, you're going to really have to use your kind of put on that, what did they call them that we all hated in elementary school, word problems. It's like, just, give me a linear equation and x and by, but it's not like that. It's a word problem. So let's just try an example. I'm just going to shoot one from the hip. And you guys see if you can figure out what I'm talking about and turn it into algebra and tell me how much to pay my person. So let's say we've got two people. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Okay, Thelma earns a wage So when I say last period, if she's paid biweekly, I mean the last biweekly pay period. She reports sales of $1,900. Okay, so Thelma earns 42 grand a year. She's paid biweekly. Plus, she gets 4 1/8% of all of her sales. Last period, her sales were $1,900. You have any questions about Thelma? Louise gets 12.5% of her sales over her quota of 100 grand a year. Her commission check is paid out with her last paycheck of the year. Her annual gross salary is $21,600, paid monthly. And in 2015, her sales were $193,261. And I want you to calculate her last check of the month, or last check of the year. In other words, that's her commission. So calculate last check of the year. Does anybody need a jump start on how to get going with either of these? Don't be shy. Raise your hand if you need some individual help. These aren't really method A and B. These are commission. These are word problems. You need to figure out how to set up the algebraic equation. That's why I'm saying there's not, you know, bullet points to do on these so much. Everyone get that for her regular check? And then her commission, help me write 4 1/8 in a decimal, please. 0.0, 0.04. $78.38, right?
I know 35. I think it's because I'm using this one on my calculator and rounding to guess.
And again, that will not, I mean, you know, in all actuality, does it need to be precise? Yeah. Am I going to ding you on it on an exam? Never. Okay. Anybody not get that on Thelma? Louise, what does she get? 21,600 paid monthly. So 21,600 divided by 12. She's paid 1,800 a month, right? And then she gets, does she get commission on everything? No, only the amount over her quota of 100. So 193,261 minus 100 is obviously what's left, right? How do I put that in decimal form? Holy buckets. Yeah, because she's living on this every month. 657. Bonus question. What's going to be Louise's problem with her taxes that last huge check? They're going to take a buttload out. That's a formal term. She's made $21,600 all year. Plus another 11, that makes her 37,000, which is about the 15% tax bracket if you're single. But if you run a check like that in 1 month, they're going to assume you make that every month, which is about 130 grand a year, which pops you into the 28%, which is they're going to take the taxes out at that level. What can she do, or what can any of you do if you're ever in the lucky situation where you're going to get a huge check, but you're still keeping the same tax bracket? What can you change for one check? Okay, and what do we do that on? Yes, you would change your W-4 for one paycheck.
Okay. Can you request to do that?
Of course you can, and they've got to do it. And then you make sure to get changed back, though, or you're going to be screwed at the end of the year. Okay, let me turn this off, and then I will just tell you what you got on for next week.